Morning, Pete, North Las Vegas. Put up a video about maybe 2 weeks ago, was talking about buffer tubes, inadvertently released some personal information and decided to take the video down. So I'm going to redo the video. We're going to be primarily focused in on MilSpec dimension buffer tubes. And I do have a commercial tube that we'll be comparing against later on in the video. Okay, well, let's get started. Okay, so I ordered 2 of these from Bravo, and this is exactly how they shipped. Wrong size bag, and most of the parts were loose inside the bag. So anyway, I thought for sure that there would be dents and scratches and whatever during shipping, but they put enough packaging paper inside the box to where nothing moved around. But I'm going to give BCM a pro tip here. Okay, BCM, how I would have shipped this, I would start off with the correct size bag. Then I would mount the buffer in the spring, and then I would put all this inside the buffer tube, like so, and I would ship it like that. And this would probably help to minimize any damage, scratches, dents, dings, or anything cosmetic happening. Pro tip. So the first thing I wanted to know in this BCM is how smooth they machined the interior walls. And it looks pretty good. I don't see any machining marks. And you get some of these from some manufacturers and it looks like it's all ribbed in there from machining. It looks like a washboard or something. So this looks pretty good. You can see a gray coating in there, some type of dry film lubricant, I would guess. Is that supposed to be there on a MilSpec? Let's find out. Okay, so according to this drawing, for these applications here, there is in fact supposed to be a solid film lubricant to the interior only. So BCM, you did a good job on that one. So on the BCM, they gave us 6 adjustments. And the drawing we're looking at here only has 4. So I thought we would take a look at the internal dimension as far as length. And you can see here, according to the drawing, there's a very slight gap where this comes down. And looks to me like they're measuring off the lip extension. So if you come up here, your buffer tubes aren't cut perfectly straight on the forward end. There's a slight lip at the bottom. So it looks to me like that's where we need to take our measurement. And that's going to be, focus. Well, you can see the lip right there. So this isn't the most precise way to measure, but let's see where we're at. Like I said, we're coming down on top of that lip, just going by what the drawing says. So it looks like we're pretty close. Let me push down a little bit harder. Yeah. 7 4/4. So we're in tolerance. According to the drawing, we can go down below 0.7009 by 10 thousandths. Okay, so I measured in a few different spots all the way up to where the threads start. And it comes in exactly the same, 1.1455. We'll just round it up to 1.146. And that's in tolerance. So far, BCM's running 100%. So on the end plate here, there is very, very little movement between it and the buffer tube slot. So if I come over here and just kind of gently move this back and forth, you'll see it's a very snug fit as far as where the locating tang is. So you don't get much slop in there at all. And there's a reason I mentioned that, which we're going to get to. So I ordered 2 of these BCM buffer assembly kits, and this one's installed on an Anderson brand new lower. The thread fit between the tube and the receiver was pretty good, a little bit just slightly on the loose side, but the castle nut on this tube fit nice and snug, and the same thing on this one that's not installed yet. So the end plate is a close tolerance. The castle nut is a close tolerance. The thread engagement to the receiver just slightly loose. Now, here's the issue I ended up having on this one here. So the end plate on the BCM here, where it engages with the Anderson, there was very little slop in there too. So you could say, well, you know, that's kind of what you want. You don't want a bunch of slop on anything. However, if you look down the end here, you can see that the stock isn't quite lined up with the receiver. And like I was saying earlier, because everything is such a snug fit on the tolerances, there's no way to get the buttstock perfectly straight with the receiver. Now, they sell fixtures to where, you know, you can align your buffer tube with the receiver, but I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but because of the tight tolerances and the snugness of how everything fitted, there's no wiggle room here. I mean, that's just where it goes. So if you got OCD like me, and this could be a little pet peeve for you, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Now, it may not be the end plate. It may not be the buffer tube. It could just be the mag pole is off a little bit on their molding here. Whatever it is, it can't be fixed unless you get out a Dremel or a file. Something I probably should have mentioned at the very beginning of the video, when you order from BCM, you order their complete buffer assembly kit, they'll give you an option to select the buffer weight. You can get a standard carbine, H1, H2, or H3. And I chose H1 for my kits because I've already got a bunch of spare standard carbines and H2s. All right, so we're going to get into an area here now when you install your buffer tube to the receiver. This is an area you got to watch out for. And I think that this issue is maybe more common than I originally thought it was, just based on my own personal experience. But we'll talk about what happens when the relationship between this buffer and where the retainer hole is drilled isn't quite right. The only time that this buffer is supposed to make contact with the retainer pin is when the receiver halves are split apart. If I had an upper on here, and as the upper comes down, the BCG is supposed to make enough engagement with this to push it off of that retainer pin. And there should be enough clearance that when the weapon is being fired, that there's no way that that buffer comes in contact with that retainer pin. The only reason for that retainer pin is to keep this buffer from flying out when you split the upper and lower receiver halves. Any other time, it is not supposed to touch. Okay, so there's an old buffer out of one of my old Colts back in 1990. If you have a bunch of wear and chewed up on the very outer edge of your buffer, something's going on here. It could be that the retainer pin hole was drilled too far back, not allowing the buffer to come out far enough and for the BCG to engage and push it off. It could be that your BCG carrier, your carrier is a little bit short. It could be that you maybe have a really high round count rifle and the barrel extension has been hammered and the BCG is being allowed to come forward, you know, just enough to where this problem occurs. You could have pin wear on your receiver. There's just a lot of things that can add up and cause this problem. And I think this problem is more common than a lot of people might think. I got quite a few rifles where I've had to put in an offset retainer pin, which I'm getting ready to talk about. Now, if you have wear on the very outer edge, that, like I said, that's your retainer. You've got a problem. Now, I don't know how well the camera is going to pick it up, but you might be able to see another faint inner ring here. That's just from the BCG. Maybe a slight burr, some dirt, grime got in there, whatever. But wear on the very outer edge, you definitely do not want that. That indicates that that buffer is hitting the retainer pin during firing. You don't want that. So if your buffer is getting chewed up because it's hitting the retainer pin, whatever's causing the problem, the easiest way to fix it is by going to an offset retainer pin. And you can see that they moved the pin to the outside. They put a shelf here that locates on the bottom of the buffer tube, and that helps keep the pin located and maintains the offset position of the pin. And you can see that the offset moves that out quite a bit, which will give your bolt carrier group more engagement with the buffer. This particular offset I got from Galloway Precision. You can see the shelf here that I was talking about earlier. That is what's going to get captured by your buffer tube lip. And that, like I said, that's what keeps the pin located in the offset position. Okay, so that's how it gets captured. So you can see lining up the MilSpec and the offset together, there's quite a bit more space between the offset and the MilSpec, which allows your buffer to come out quite a bit further and get better engagement with your bolt carrier group. And then, like I was saying, when you close the two receiver halves during firing of the weapon, that keeps your buffer from hitting the retainer pin. Okay, well, we'll just talk about the difference between a MilSpec dimension tube and a commercial, and then this video will be over. This is my old Bushmaster that I bought mid-90s, and I bought the lower complete, and it came with a commercial spec buffer tube. Now, you're going to see a lot of people on YouTube saying that you can always spot a commercial buffer tube by how the back end is machined. On a commercial tube, a lot of them are machined at a slant, so they'll come down this way in the back. This one here is straight cut, so you can't always say that just because it's a straight cut buffer tube that it's MilSpec. It may not be. So if you see a video where they're saying that, that's how you can positively identify a commercial spec tube is by them being slant cut, that's not always true. Okay, so here's what you used to get when you buy Magpul stocks. I recently bought a brand new SLK, and it did not come with this, but Magpul used to send these out, and you can see the difference between MilSpec and commercial. And down here in the text, they're talking about slant cut versus straight cut, and they're kind of saying that there are some exceptions. So anyway, I thought we'd take some measurements just to show you the difference between what I actually have here. So Magpul for commercial says about 1.17. And that's exactly where we're at. So even though this has a straight cut back end, this is still commercial spec. Okay, here's the brand new BCM, MilSpec dimension, right on the money. Magpul rounded that up just a little bit, 1.15. This is the all aluminum buttstock off the Bushmaster on the BCM, and you can see it's got a lot of slop. You're not going to like how that fits. It'll go on there, but it's going to be loose. Okay, that's a Prudent American Technologies cage code. And these guys were suppliers for Colt, to my understanding. And this is MilSpec. So let's just see if it can even get started on a commercial tube. And you can see it's not going to go. Okay, I'm going to give BCM a 9.5 out of 10. The only reason they're getting a half-point deduction is because of how they shipped it. Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out. Okay, bonus clip. A couple things I forgot to mention during the video. If you have to use an offset retainer pin, chances are that if you have an enhanced buffer tube where they've extended the slip out quite a bit further, or if you have the type of buffer tube that's slotted in here, you're probably not going to be able to use the offset retainer pin. You may have to go back to more of a MilSpec dimension tube. The other thing was when I mentioned that the difference between MilSpec and commercial tubes, not always being able to tell which is which by how the back end is cut. On your MilSpec, generally it's kind of hard to see, but the thread OD will stick up slightly higher than the main tube OD. And on a commercial tube, the threads will generally be even with the tube. And so that's one way you can tell, but it's kind of hard to see, especially when if it's already mounted on the firearm. Okay, well, that's it for real this time. Over and out.